Global Media 28 a présenté Breaking News, Washington Politique. Washington Politique, ça cap fait, ça cap cuit, ça cap dit en dans Kongrè ak dans Maison Blanche, sorti lundi, rivé vendredi, chaque après-midi 1h30, 2h, chaque soir 7h30, 9h, sur channel YouTube Global Media 28 là, avec Jean-Pierre Leroy. Global Media 28, une plateforme multimédia pour un village global.
Internautes et téléspectateurs tout partout dans le monde, bienvenue sur Global Media 28. Je vous dis, nous présentons un segment spécial, nous sommes capables de dire, sous dossier Haïti, puisque nous connaissons que Komsyon Afè Etranjè, chanm député dans le Kongrè américain, rencontré avec plusieurs représentants d'organisations société civile haïtienne, il y a d'autres invités tout, pour être capable de jeter un coup d'œil sur la situation dans le pays d'Haïti, sur la crise politique là, pour être passer en revue différents aspects dans la crise ça explique le blocage là, et après, il y a pour faire une recommandation à l'administration Biden. Donc, il y a 3 représentants d'organisations de la société civile qui dans le programme ça, qui, comme capé témoignage. Donc, nous voulons parler de Emmanuel Adouillon, que tout le monde connaît dans le pays d'Haïti, comme un activiste politique, c'est-à-dire qu'il est impliqué dans l'activité politique, dans la question et surveiller le droit monde, comment la situation a passé pour les haïtiens. Donc, organisation NOU PAP DOMI. Il y a Gerline Joseph tout, qui c'est représentant Haitian Bridge Alliance. Et puis, il y a Marie Rosie Auguste du Sénat, et c'est directrice programme réseau national défense droit monde en Haïti, RNDDH. Donc, 3 représentants d'organisations société civile là, qui virtuellement, Jean-Marc fait là avec nous là, yo même yo devant écran yo, et il y a une commission congrès qui, et bien sûr, les députés de commission congrès qui devant écran tout, donc c'est virtuel que l'a fait. Donc, audition spéciale sur Haïti, vendredi 12 mars là, Washington, Global Media 28, pour inviter au suivre, nous entrer un peu tard dans live là, par rapport à ça qu'a fait dans Washington, mais nous pour partager avec vous, ça qu'a dit en dans audition virtuelle ça. Donc, restez branchés, pour suivre Washington politique, et sans plus tarder, nous allons entrer avant dans live ça, côté plusieurs parlementaires, démocrates et républicains dans la commission ça, eh bien, you a fait audition ça sur Haïti.
Qui lui-même qui affaiblit parce que l'autorité l'État a décidé pour renforcer gang armé au détriment de la police là.
Today we have a weakened police force because the government has decided to support armed and armed gangs within the country instead of providing resources to the Haitian police.
Gang armé, c'est eux qui a par exemple, ils ont suffisamment d'armes, ils ont plus d'armes pour faire la police là.
The current gangs we have in the country have more weapons than the police forces themselves.
Ambassador White, can you tell me if other ambassadors...
Et c'est même gens tout, on a parlé de questions qui ont rapport avec mandat. C'est même gens tout, on a parlé sur questions qui ont rapport avec mandat, par exemple, de président de facto Jovenel Moïse qui finit. Et je ne dis à l'éclair, c'est constitution qui dit que le mandat finit. Et même calcul que l'ité utilisé pour te dire que le mandat sénateur fini, c'est même calcul ça que la société a utilisé pour dire que le mandat finit.
Today, when we are talking about the mandate of former President Jovenel Moïse, he used the Constitution to say that the mandate of the parliament ended. Today, the Haitian population is using the same calculation to say that his mandate has ended.
All right. Ambassador White, can you just speak to the question of have other ambassadors spoken up about what is going on in Haiti? Ambassador White?
Unmute, Ambassador White. Please unmute.
All right. Yeah, they have certainly spoken out against about all the violence. They've spoken out about human rights abuses. What I'm not sure about is, what are the consequences? You can say, well, this is horrible and the situation is horrible and Haiti's a mess, but what exactly do we do about it? So I have not seen that articulated, and it might have been articulated. I have not personally seen it. And just, if you will, this question of the army came up when I was ambassador there. And they kept saying, we want an army, we want an army. And I kept saying, why would you want an army? It just seems ridiculous.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much, Chairman. I'm finished. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. And now recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Africa, Global Health, and Global Human Rights, the Chris Smith of New Jersey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for convening this important hearing. You and the ranking member and Albie Osiris, Chairman, have asked, I think, a lot of the important questions about the political leadership. I would like to just focus for a moment with our distinguished witnesses on, we all remember in 2010 when 200,000 people died from the earthquake, and 10 months later, there was a horrible outbreak of cholera. And for about a century, Haiti had not known cholera. And after a great deal of investigation, Ban Ki-moon finally came to the conclusion from an expert panel that it was brought to Haiti by the peacekeepers from Nepal. It was a strain that was found in Nepal. And their camp was so, unfortunately, unsanitary. Their waste led to contaminated water. And about 800,000+ people got sick. 10,000 Haitians died. And there were commitments made. I know CDC worked very hard on this, as did our U.S. government, State Department, and USAID, to make sure that sanitation was improved. But I wonder, just snapshot, has it been improved to the point where there is robust sanitary conditions in Haiti as a result of lessons learned, so that there's never again, waterborne illnesses like the cholera that was taken to so many people? Secondly, there was talk of reparations, and there was even a lawsuit, sadly, that was dismissed by a federal judge about reparations, because this had a causation, and it was UN peacekeepers. And I'm wondering if anyone would like to speak to that issue. And finally, on human trafficking, Mr. Chairman, Haiti is a Tier 2 country, as per the last report by TIP, Trafficking in Persons. But there's a very, very ongoing serious problem of children being put into forced labor, domestic servitude. In 2014, Haiti passed a law, I know the ambassador knows about that, on TIP. Enforcement has been lackluster, to say the least. There were no prosecutions during the reporting period for the last TIP report, the 2020 report. And I'm just wondering if our distinguished witnesses could shed light on the status of victims and the prosecutions of traffickers and the prevention strategies in Haiti. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield to the answers.
Thank you, Congressman Smith. I don't have enough data to comment on improvement in terms of sanitation, in case of human trafficking. But what I can say is that there is no real prosecution of criminals in Haiti at this time. There is a lot of impunity, and even people who are involved in massacres are not pursued. They do not face charge. They are not held accountable. So I won't even mention for other cases. And this is directly linked to corruption, rampant corruption and impunity in Haiti. The overall situation is that if we want to tackle some specific problem like human trafficking and even bad living condition, it has a lot to see with leadership and the governance of the country. And for the past 4 years, Haiti has been in a crisis of leadership with a president that himself is accused of being involved in corruption. Therefore, there is little chance that we could see any improvement in terms of prosecution against people involved in human trafficking or any other type of crime.
Thank you. Anybody else like to respond?
Thank you so much,
Moi, t'aimerais aimé répondre, s'il vous plaît. Merci un peu, le Congressman Smith.
The reality is, as we know, in Haiti, when we speak about the cholera, when we see what has happened, nothing has been done. No reparation has been provided for those impacted community members. It is unacceptable to see how not only the what we call the corruption in Haiti, the way that the international community always deals with issues in Haiti, whether it is things that are happening on the ground, such as the chaos, or even things such we see the UN worker unfortunately got cholera due to lack of sanitation, due to lack of infrastructure to make sure that the people that we are serving are protected. So this is a clear example of how negative the entire international community, including, as we can see, the UN treats Haiti when it comes to those type of issues.
Thank you.
Merci en pile, Congressman Smith.
Oh, the gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize Representative Brad Sherman of California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for holding this hearing. Haiti and the United States have a long relationship. It is, after all, our first sister republic here in the Western Hemisphere. Unfortunately, Haiti is one of the poorest nations in the Western Hemisphere. Haiti has only 14,000 to 15,000 police in its Haitian National Police, which is less than international standards would call for the policing of such a populated country. Between 2008 and 2019, there were 3,200 Indian policemen who were there as part of the UN. And then our colleague Chris Smith points out how UN peacekeepers from Nepal were a problem for Haiti. So I'll ask first Ms. Doyen, would international peacekeepers or international police assistance be helpful in providing for the rule of law in Haiti?
Thank you, Congressman Sherman. Of course, help is always welcome, but I'll say that we need to focus more on improving the capacity of the Haitian National Police, because what I notice is that every time we have foreigners coming, helping, when they leave, the local staff is not better off. We don't see any real improvement. It's like they come here, do the job, but they don't really reinforce the capacity of the police. And at this time, the Haitian National Police is suffering from bad reputation, and some policemen are denouncing bad working condition. They need increase in their salary. They need the health care. They need a better environment to work, and we need even more police officers. So if I could recommend something, I would recommend that we work on the Haitian National Police, ensure that every police officer can take care of his family and they can get perfect training instead of bringing more police officers from anywhere.
The written reports say that there have been 251 COVID deaths in Haiti. That seems like a very low number. Ms. White, should I believe that number, or is it dramatically understated?
Yeah, I do think you should believe the number. Now, I can't quite figure it out myself, because there's at least 8 or 9 times that many of COVID deaths right across the border in the DR. And as we all know, Haiti does not have exactly the most efficient healthcare system in the world. But for whatever reason, my very, very trusted doctor from, that has ties to Cornell, that's a Haitian doctor, has confirmed to me that the number of COVID deaths have been relatively low. And this in Africa.
While I have you, I've got one more question. That is, Haiti is one of the 15 nations to recognize Taiwan. We have the Beijing offering free assistance, concessionary loans. Is Haiti better off sticking with Taiwan? And should we be concerned with China trying to develop a relationship with the government of Haiti?
Is this for me again?
Yeah.
I don't know the extent of what the Taiwanese is doing in Haiti anymore, to say the honest, so I can't really comment on that. But I have seen the Chinese slowly creeping in all across Africa and Haiti, and I personally do not think this is a good thing.
Yeah. They've sent hundreds of thousands of face masks, thousands of tons of rice. That is to say, Taiwan has to one of, yes, it's only 15 nations with whom they have a relationship. And finally, for whichever witness, well, I've got only 29 seconds. That's not enough time for anybody to answer a question. I'll yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Asia, the Pacific, Central Asia, and Nonproliferation, Representative Steve Shabbat of Ohio, for 5 minutes.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. My screen just went.
I hear you, Mr. Shabbat. I do hear you. We hear you.
It wasn't a very judicious time for this thing to freeze. I'm not sure if anybody can hear me.
We hear you, Mr. Shabbat.
It's frozen here.
Okay.
No.
Mr. Shabbat, can you hear me?
We can come back to me because I assume you're probably not hearing me.
We'll come back to Mr. Shabbat. So I'll go now to Representative Brian Mast of Florida. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me, and thank you to our witnesses for participating today as well. My question goes to this, and it's open to any of our witnesses. It's a general question.
Back 29 seconds. I've never done that before. No.
Mr. Chairman, put yourself on mute, please.
I think he muted. I think it was just a quick error. We'll get over that one. My question goes to our witnesses generally. And I'd ask for reflection on America and overcoming our challenges with the inception of our nation and the founding of our independence and creating of our democratic systems that we rely on here. And what it is that individuals just off my shore as a Floridian see that draw to come to here in the United States of America, of which I have a large Haitian community as well within my area of South Florida. What do you think can be learned and brought back to Haiti to help replicate what it is that is drawing people here to our shores?
Always talk about Haiti being the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, but we always fail to look at the root causes of that fact. Going back 200 years within the relationships and the fact that from the very inception of Haiti, France forced with the international powers for Haiti to pay because we freed ourselves, to pay France for lost wages of slavery that was created on our backs. So these are the very root causes of Haiti being in the state that it is. So we see from there the continued, inaction, misaction, and straight out abuse of Haiti, in Haiti, on Haiti. And we see that people leaving, as I previously mentioned, Haiti was not a sending country. Haiti was a receiving country, lighting the way for freedom, not only for Haiti, but other places. Haiti was the only country that provided citizenship for the Jews to escape so that they can get freedom. So when we come back to what we experienced earlier this year in this great United States of ours, and I must say that I am both a proud Haitian woman and a proud American woman. So there is a lot to be learned. There's a lot that can be used to provide assistance and provide relief in Haiti. I believe.
Thank you for your response, ma'am. I just want to pause you and ask you to continue. What is that piece to be learned? That's what I want to get at. What is that piece to be learned that you just said there is a lot to be learned? What is that needs to be brought back to Haiti to result in success?
Not to be brought back in Haiti per se, but to work with Haiti to be able to create a sustainable, solution. When we look into what we are experiencing here in the United States, how do we work with the Haitian people to implement those things that can be successful so that they themselves can be able to lead for themselves?
Very important point. I want us to work with the Haitian people, and I think we do that very well. And there's definitely room for improvement, but I know as a Floridian, this is something that touches us very close to home. I would never, however, say that it's not more important, or rather that it isn't more important that Haitians individually within Haiti look in the mirror and say, we can't rely on America, we can't rely on France, we can't rely on others. We're hopeful for their assistance, but we have to look in the mirror and say, how do we do this? And that's what I hope we can really get to a root of, is what does Haiti have to look in the mirror and decide is going to occur there, whether they get the assistance from Haiti, from the U.S. or anybody else. What is it that they can look in the mirror and do to correct what is missing there? And in that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the time, and I have nothing to yield back, but thank you for the time.
Can I add something? Can I respond to that?
That's expired. The gentleman
Chairman allows you.
No, I cannot. We got a lot of members waiting to ask questions.
Because this is so important.
We will get to it. I'll get it when someone asks you the question next. Maybe Mr. Connolly or someone else. But I got to yield time to the president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Representative Jerry Connolly of the state of Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our panel. Part of this discussion, it seems to me, we've sort of ignored the American historical context with respect to Haiti. And Ms. Douillon, you may want to comment on that, as well as Ambassador White. The American history with Haiti is wretched. After brutal French colonialism was overturned, we refused to recognize a Black, formerly enslaved government in Haiti because it threatened slavery in America in the 19th century. We refused commerce. We denied them access to trade and investment credits, and helped impoverish the country and keep it impoverished. We've invaded the country. We've occupied the country. We've installed governments and taken down governments and reinstalled governments. And maybe I could start with you, Ambassador White, because surely you're aware of that historical perspective. But it's not like the current condition of Haiti is intrinsically dysfunctional. There are historical reasons why it is in the condition it's in, and a lot of it can be traced to American policy and intervention. Very little of it good over the panoply of history. So given that, shouldn't we tread a little lightly on things like conditionality and dictating terms of what Haiti needs to do? And how best can the United States try to influence positive and desirable outcomes in terms of democracy, in terms of lifting people out of poverty, in terms of trying to promote a more robust economic growth that benefits everybody? Ambassador White, and then Mr. Williams.
Yeah, it's too bad we don't have 3-4 hours discussion because it's a long one. But you're right, the history between the United States and Haiti is a long-paid affair and has been for a long time. I distinctly remember, like I was saying, in 1986 when a big dog left. And I remember sitting in the embassy and the Ambassador Adams, who was a fabulous ambassador, he said, we're going to have elections. And I remember saying, elections? There's no political party, there's no judiciary, there's no police except the Tonto Foods, how the heck are we going to have elections? And like, well, that's what we do for a democracy. And I think, elections ever since have been difficult. But I know this idea of conditionality is written at versus eyebrows, but I do think that if we are not saying clearly what it is we are expecting of the government of Haiti, then we don't have a roadmap, and we desperately need a roadmap. We might be doing that. I am not in on any discussions. I'm not part of the full group. No one calls me from Haiti, well, my Haitian friends, but not my American friends for advice. So I don't know. We may be doing more about it, but they deserve to know what they're getting for their money.
Thank you. Ms. Douillon, I know you wanted to respond to both Mr. Mass and hopefully my observation as well.
Thank you, Congressman Connolly. I totally agree with the fact you shared about the history between U.S. and Haiti. And it's true that it has been complicated. And to reply to Congressman Mass' comment, Haiti is not waiting for the U.S., France, or any other country in the international community. We've already decided what we want to do. What we are asking is for the international community to listen and respect our choice. We have a president whose term ended last February. He has benefited from the support of the OAS, the U.S. State Department, and despite the fact that most of Haiti civil society acknowledge that his term ended according to the Constitution. This is what we are facing now. And this is a perfect example of when we do not listen to Haitian, we cannot judge them later and blame them for the outcome. And it's also important to differentiate between the people who always stand for the country and versus the elected officials who are usually corrupt and are minding their own business and are defending their own interests, usually with the support of the international community, who is always saying that they are supporting institutions while they are supporting people who are often decried by the own population. This is the perfect case study now with Jovenel Moïse. For more than 2 years, people have been calling on him to resign. Now, we are not even calling on him to resign because his term ended. We call him to vacate office. And he has the support of international community. We want to end with all those the corruption and impunity. We want to end with the old practices. And so many people do not want to give us this chance to decide for ourselves. And this is why we are saying we are having this hearing now. This is our point. This is why we are defending the right to decide for ourselves, for the international community to listen and follow the Haitian civil society lead, because we know better. We know what's good for us. We know where we made mistakes in the past. We are learning from this, and it's trial and error. It's a young democracy. We are learning and we are adjusting, and now it's a turning point. And this is why we need solidarity, not the kind of comment like that.
Thank you for that.
Carlo, I yield back.
Time has expired. I think we're still working to get Mr. Shabbat on camera. So while we continue to do that, I'll now recognize the ranking member of the Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere, Civilian Security, Migration, International Economic Policy, Representative Mark Green of Tennessee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Meeks and Ranking Member McCall, for holding this hearing on Haiti. It's an honor to serve as the ranking member on Western Hemisphere, and obviously this focus on Haiti is a critical aspect of our subcommittee. I thank Chairman Cyrus for his comments as well, his wisdom and experience. When I founded my medical foundation, Align MD Foundation, and then Two Rivers Medical Foundation, we sent medical mission trips to Haiti, and the country was then challenged with poverty, rule of law issues, and governance issues, and unfortunately the situation is only worse now. It's tragic for many reasons. History makes it even more so. Haiti's first constitution was influenced by our own Alexander Hamilton, who grew up in the Caribbean himself. Unfortunately, pervasive corruption, desperate poverty have long plagued the country. It remains one of the poorest nations in the Caribbean, lagging far behind its neighbors in basic measures of economic and political well-being. The Haitian people need and deserve better. As a neighbor, friend, and partner, we should do what we can. But as we have all noted today, it's sadly an uphill battle. The turmoil and instability, including the recent prison break, underscore the absence of the rule of law. Haiti ranks toward the bottom of many international comparisons for transparency, economic development, and ease of doing business. Sadly, recent events have shown us that Haiti still has a long way to go. My questions today are really for anyone who wants to chime in. We're hearing that the prisons in Haiti are now at 384% capacity, and my first thought is that some of these arrests may very well be politically motivated, but we also are seeing large increases in violent crime. Can you share with us, anyone of the witnesses, about the state of criminal justice in Haiti and what portion of those criminals are actually criminals versus political prisoners, and also, the status of the prisons that are so full? How is that impacting criminal justice?
Merci un pile, Congressman Marvin. Moi, ap répondre une question qui a un rapport avec prison yo, et effectivement, ça n'a commencé par dire, c'est que journée jeudi,
we want to take your questions regarding the prison system in Haiti.
Et ça n'a commencé par dire, c'est que journée jeudi, nous yo ap vivre dans prison dans des conditions inhumaines et dégradantes.
The people who are incarcerated are living in inhuman conditions.
Nous avons une prison qui est capable d'accueillir pour pipiti 3,000 personnes.
The current prison that we have can hold about 3,000.
Et journée jeudi a gagné environ 12,000 personnes qui sont en prison.
And today we have 12,000 people incarcerated.
Donc nous pouvons imaginer dans quelles conditions nous sommes à vivre.
So then you can just imagine the deplorable condition that these inmates are in.
Gagner tout au niveau de dysfonctionnement système judiciaire là, en pile violation droit à garantie judiciaire qui a fait.
And also, during the dysfunction of the judiciary system, there is a lot of violations of the rights of those inmates that are occurring on a regular basis.
84% nous qui dans prison, je ne sais pas ça attend jugement, il y en a qui gagnent plus passé 10 ans en attente de jugement.
Like I said earlier, 84% of the incarcerated populations are awaiting trial. There are people in there who's been incarcerated for 10 years and have not seen a judge.
Et journée jeudi, ça qui est effrayant pour nous, c'est que gagner effectivement des prisonniers politiques, des gens que pouvoir en place là a arrêté à cause de positions politiques, opinions politiques.
The worst thing for us today is that, yes, indeed, we have political prisoners. There are people who are incarcerated because of their political belief and their stand against this government.
Et là, nous comprenons que pendant toute année, ça, il y a des gens qui arrêtés dans la prison sans que pas jugé et que pour nous là, ils ont utilisé pour mettre des gens dans la prison pour opinion, donc nous comprenons que nous avons raison pour nous très inquiets.
So think about someone who spent 10 years in prison without appearing before a judge, and individuals who are also being incarcerated for their political belief, what that situation is like. It is worsening daily.
Et malheureusement, malgré toute promesse que l'autorité de l'État a fait, il n'y a pas jamais arrivé à résoudre le problème de détention préventive illégale et arbitraire. Merci.
Unfortunately, no matter what promises the government has made, they have done nothing to resolve the issue of prolonged detentions for those inmates. Thank you.
If I could, I'd also like to ask the ambassador if she might share a little bit of her perspective on the spillover effects, what's going on in Haiti, how it's spilling over in the region, the rest of the Caribbean, and particularly neighboring Dominican Republic.
Ambassador White, please turn on your camera and off mute. Is Ambassador White still there with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, sorry. I've got like 3 devices going here, and they're all running out of power. Let me just go over here. Yeah, there's always spillover in the region. I mean, the DR, has a booming economy, and the Haitians are going back and forth over the border every day. And what's worrying me more, and what worries me about still the ambassador there, is the amount of the huge increase in Haitians trying to get to the United States. And, they use, means to get there that are highly dangerous. They die all the time. And the only way to stop immigration, whether it's from Haiti or Guatemala or wherever, Mexico, is to create better conditions in the country so they don't want to leave. And so the violence that is going on in Haiti right now, the lack of rule of law, the lack of human rights, is driving Haitians out of the country to almost anywhere else they can do to get any kind of opportunity for their families. And then in my statement, I said it's very hard to do regular development activities in the midst of a violent country. So, just one feeds off the other. And that's why it's just so critical that the human rights situation, the violence, the gangs, that situation has got to be looked at immediately. I don't think you can do anything else until you stop that, including elections.
I now recognize the chair of the subcommittee on Africa, global health, and global human rights, Representative Karen Bass from California.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually want to continue with the ambassador right where she was going, because I understood what you said in terms of the gangs and all of that. The question is, what should we do? I know that we've mentioned the police. It's my understanding that the people we have trained, be it the police or the military, then are the ones that shot live rounds into the protesters, and it's questionable as to whether or not they were colluding with the government. So the question to you is, what can we do as the United States? And then when you were ambassador, I know that you facilitated a number of rounds of negotiations between conflicting parties. And I want to know, based on your time there, what lessons learned? What could you have done to have prevented what you saw at the time, and what should we be doing now? Now, you able?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. So I don't want to lose my time with her technical problems. Right. Can we?
I've got like 3.
Your time is held until such time.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now, hear you.
You want me to talk really fast?
Yes, go now.
Okay, go. So I had lots and lots of meetings with the opposition, even to the point of getting attacked by mobs. I remember, if you're not bringing the opposition to the negotiating table, then you can't make progress. And I have no idea. I presume that they're doing that all the time. You got to get out of your office into their offices and open up the dialogue. I just assume that that's being done. I do not know. But it's a good question about the police. That I think that we can't give up on the police. We've invested millions of dollars in the police. They can be reinforced. They can be. They were in a very good position. You've got to get them.
Well, I realize we invested a lot of money, but if our investment results in shooting innocent people and colluding with the existing government, that doesn't sound like a good return on investment to me. So I'm just wondering if you have a thought. I have a couple of other questions for our other witnesses, but if you have a thought as to what we can do differently. What did you learn during that time? What can we do differently? I don't want to reinforce a piece of.
Yeah, right. I'm with you. Yeah, gotcha. Well, I like I said, we got to tell them to root out the bad actors. I mean, you're right. They've been seen shooting into crowds. Root out the bad actors. We did that before. We did that. There were bad actors when I was there too. And we had this fabulous New York policemen that would come down and they would do audits, they would do interviews, they would do training. And okay. I just think we have to go back to that.
All right, thank you, Madam Ambassador. Let me move on to Ms. Duyan. And, one, it is clear we don't need to have a referendum for the Constitution. The elections are going to be shaky. So the question is, what should we do? not change the Constitution, postpone the elections? What is it? And I also believe very deeply that we need to address root causes. But for right now, if no election, then what?
Thank you, Congresswoman Bass. First of all, what you can do is cancel that CP. Stop. We recommend. It's not up to you to cancel it. You have to recommend.
What?
I say I said that you have to cancel the CEP, but I correct my language and I said it's not up to you to cancel it. It's to not support Jovenel Moïse with that CEP. The CEP is the electoral council. We cannot continue with an illegal electoral council. We cannot have a referendum that is illegal, and we have to listen to civil society. And the solution now is, since the term of the president ended last month, we have to constitute a non-partisan, consensus-based team that is capable of leading the country, organize fair election, restore peace, improve the security conditions.
Do you have respected leaders that if the president was called on to step aside, are there respectable, unifying leaders that we could call for, should be a part of that team that you just mentioned?
Of course, it would be a disaster if there were no qualified, serious, and non-corrupt Haitians.
No, it's not qualified people. The question is,
serious and non-corrupt people. Yes, there exist people like this exist. There are many people like this, and actually, there is a consensus among civil society that we can have such teams. All we need to do is to have Jovenel Moïse to back him. And we also need.
My time has run out, but can you tell us who those people are, what the team would be? And you don't have to answer right this question second, but can you send it to us?
I cannot name anyone because of the current situation in Haiti. I'm afraid if I name them now, they might be arrested.
All right.
Like the
The general lady's time has expired. I now recognize Representative Andy Barr from Kentucky for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really appreciate your leadership on this issue and bringing this issue to the attention of our committee. It's such an important issue, and I represent in central Kentucky a faith community that has invested considerable time and resources in mission trips to Haiti. They bring back beautiful stories of wonderful people, yes, impoverished people, people who are struggling, but wonderful people who deserve better. And so many churches around this country have sponsored mission trips similar to those of my constituents, and we want the best for the people of Haiti. And the very regrettable track record of human rights violations and violence and corruption is obviously something we're all interested in. But let me start by asking Ambassador White kind of a fundamental question, which is, aside from the obvious humanitarian interest that we have in improving the conditions of Haiti, what would you say is, if any, the strategic national security interest of the United States in that country? And is it the historic connection between Haiti and Taiwan and potentially countering a Chinese Communist Party Belt and Road Initiative in Haiti?
Well, that's a real possibility. But I think more to the point is that if we don't develop Haitians and give the Haitians a decent quality of living, including giving them something to do, employment and basic health care and human rights, that you're going to find them on doors and numbers, and we can afford to do that.
Let me ask you a question about the comment that you made. I really appreciated, Ambassador, about conditionality with foreign aid, and Mr. Connolly's recitation of American history with respect to Haiti. The American people, American taxpayers, not just in terms of these mission trips, but the taxpayers deserve substantial credit and generosity here. What I'm reading is, just since the earthquake alone, the United States taxpayer has invested $5.1 billion. And since 2011, USAID, $1.8 billion, $100 million in 2020 alone. I would just argue, and Ambassador, I invite your feedback, if U.S. foreign aid was the answer to Haiti's many problems, then those problems would have been solved a long time ago. I mean, there's absolutely no shortage of American and international funding here. It's just been so badly mismanaged and subject to corruption. And so please amplify your testimony about the critical importance of conditionality associated with any additional taxpayer investment in Haiti in terms of anti-corruption efforts.
Yeah, people use art, and I must say that after the earthquake, we had about $2 billion after the earthquake. It killed 300,000 people. I mean, everything was gone. The roads were gone. The airport was gone. And I mean, people kept saying, but you had $2 billion. And I said, I needed $20 billion to rebuild the nation after an earthquake of that size. So although it looks like a tremendous amount of money, it's, to rebuild from nothing. Even we did a fantastic job. We did get together again. 50% of Americans gave into their pocket to help make that happen. And by the way, those get a bad name in Haiti. Thank God for the religious NGOs who are doing a fabulous job down there.
And reclaiming my time, I don't have much time left, Ambassador White, but I do want to follow up on Representative Sherman's important question about Taiwan. Are we seeing an active Belt and Road Initiative from the Chinese and post-pandemic, Chinese malign influence in the Caribbean impacting Haiti in a way that would, separate Haiti as an ally of Taiwan and as one of only 15 countries maintaining official recognition with Taiwan? Is there any information you can give us on that?
I'm sorry, but there really isn't. I do not know what Taiwan's up to. I don't.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for the hearing. It's very illuminating, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the chair of the Subcommittee on Middle East, North Africa, and Global Counterterrorism, Representative Ted Deutsch from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for calling this important hearing. Thanks to all the witnesses for your candid and powerful testimony. I share the concern some of my colleagues have already expressed over the current situation in Haiti. And as a representative of South Florida, as my colleague from South Florida, Mr. Mass, mentioned a little while ago, this is an issue that hits close to home for so many in the Haitian diaspora community in my district. And I'd like to start by continuing the conversation about protocol concerns for the proposed elections. I think we can all agree elections are sorely needed. We all agree that the Haitian people deserve free, fair, and credible elections. And I have heard the concerns of our witnesses today that the current proposed CEP is illegitimate, even illegal. And I've heard similar concerns from Haiti's civil society and from the diaspora community in my district. So, Ms. Auguste, in your view, are there any reforms that would make the current Provisional Electoral Council, as proposed by the administration, independent, legitimate, and able to administer free, fair, and credible elections? Ms. Auguste.
Yes. Merci un pile, Congressman Dutch. Et pour nous-mêmes, il est clair que journée jodi a élection pas qu'à réaliser j'en a fait là. Pour qui ça? Pour toute raison que nous sommes avancés là yo, qui gagne pour avec toute irrégularité nous
Thank you, Congressman Dutch. With regard to the current CEP, it is not possible to have election with this illegal CEP, and we have already enumerated the various reasons why that cannot happen.
Mais tout à l'heure, elle t'a parlé de insécurité. Moi, t'as même mettre un accent sur l'information qui va permettre de plus comprendre ce qui a passé dans le pays.
Earlier, when I was talking about insecurity, I would like to add a few points for you to better understand what's going on in the country.
Journée jodi a département l'Ouest avec département Artibonite représentait 60% électorat haïtien.
Today, the West Department and the Artibonite Department represent 60% of the Haitian electorate.
Or, genye an pile nan circonscription sa yo ki kontrole pa gang armé ki a la solde de pouvoir en place la.
The majority of these voters are being housed in the same place where there are many gangs that are associated with the current government.
Donc, ça veut dire tout candidat qui pallié à gang pouvoir en place pas capable de mener campagne.
That also means that all candidates who are not associated with those gangs in the government will not be able to go into those neighborhoods campaign.
Pendant 2 ans, l'État haïtien lui fait 3 millions de cartes électorales et lui distribuait moins que 2 millions.
Within 2 years, the government made 3 million electoral cards. So far, they have distributed less than 2 million.
Or, ils sont supposés faire 7,500,000 cartes pour électeurs et électrices.
They were supposed to have done 7,500,000 cards for the voters to be able to participate in the election process.
Si élection prévue pour août 2021, si élection prévue, excusez-moi, pour novembre 2021, ça veut dire qu'en août 2021, il faut que fin distribuer toutes cartes ça.
If we are saying that election will take place in September, that will mean in August, all the electoral cards have to be distributed.
Ça veut dire que c'est un bagage qui est impossible et l'État haïtien pas capable faire.
It is virtually impossible within the current situations for the Haitian government to realize that.
Et enfin, c'est à lui-même.
Ms. Auguste, Ms. Auguste, I appreciate that. I just have a bit, excuse me, a bit more time. So let me just, if I may, thank you. And sorry, everyone. And, I want to just, given what you just said, Ms. Auguste, I just want to address the position that's been emphasized by some of our witnesses and members here today, which is that any election or referendum that is overseen by the Moïse administration would automatically be seen by the Haitian people as illegitimate. We have seen on the ground, I've heard firsthand, human rights groups and opposition leaders maintaining that Moïse's term ended February 7th and an interim government is necessary to organize elections. Now, the question, Ambassador White, that I have for you is, if the Provisional Electoral Council cannot meet the standard of being free, fair, and credible, but the current president does not step down, how can Congress, the Biden administration, and the international community play a responsible role in ensuring that any election that is held is credible and legitimate, and in facilitating the public acceptance of the results, and in mediating between the Moïse administration and the opposition? That's what we're trying to do. I think that's what we need to do. Ambassador?
As I said in my testimony, I think that it would be nice if he would step down, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I think that we sort of put him aside at the best of, in the best of all worlds, and we have a prime minister appointed that is non-corrupt, that is not from the political sector, that's not from the private sector. There are several really good candidates. I'm not going to name them, but there are several. And then we have this summit that we put out the OCEP. We have a summit where the actors come back to the table and we discuss how we can get the right representation in order to have a CEP that is credible. I mean, that is one solution that I can see happening within the very near future. I think the problem with transitional governments is then we're in that mess again, and it slows down everything again. It's not that in fact, I wrote a piece, or I talked to a piece in New Yorker a couple of years ago when I said I think that's exactly what we need. But I think right now we could use the prime minister option.
Thank you very much. I think my time has expired. Thanks, Ambassador. Thanks to all the witnesses. Mr. Chairman, thanks for this very important hearing today. You'll pay.
That is right. The gentleman's time has expired. I'm going to, after I recognize the next member, I'm going to ask Representative Levin to chair the meeting briefly, as I have to step away to another briefing. But I shall be back shortly. But Representative Levin will chair. I now recognize Representative Greg Stubbe of Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions are for Ambassador White. Haiti's porous border with the Dominican Republic is extremely vulnerable to illicit trade. Haiti's maritime borders also remain virtually unregulated, which contributes to economic insecurity. How can the Haitian government increase customs control at its borders?
Oh boy, good question. Very good question. We worked so much when I was there, and we were making progress. A lot of us consulting with the people that had set up customs border patrols in the United States, and we were making some real progress. But then the funding ran out, and I think it all just went backwards. But you know, you can set up honest custom control across a Haitian border if you have enough money to do it, and that's the big problem. And you know, especially U.S. Customs Patrol people were incredibly knowledgeable and incredibly generous with their time and helping us and advising us. And I think that you know, that if we could get that back on track again, it would be fabulous and needed.
Well, could you describe how serious this problem is to Haiti's future development prospects?
You know, I have not been to Haiti in 3 years. I don't know what's going on right now. I can certainly tell you what was going on when I was there, but the migration of workers and the migration of goods, and you know, even there was an enormous scare about the migration of disease, is something all that really needs to be looked at. And at least during my tenure, there was an enormous problem.
So what could the Biden administration do to help build up border security there?
Yeah, I think we should go. I mean, what we would do, you know, quite a good strategy, and I think we could go back to it very easily. And that is building up you know, structures and training. And it, you know, not only was it great because it was going to increase border security, but it also gave an opportunity for wonderful employment opportunities.
Adam Hoffner of the U.S. Border Patrol Miami sector stated, and I quote, "We continuously warn migrants about the dangers associated with traveling by sea. Smuggling organizations are not concerned with the safety of the people they are smuggling. Rather, they continue to put the lives of migrants at risk." What could the Biden administration do to address this issue?
Well, you know, it all goes back about the core reasons that, you know, why are people leaving Haiti to start with? And you know, we went through a period when I was ambassador, where migration to the United States was almost zero. It was very seldom, you know, and that's when we were having a lot of development dollars, and we were pumping a lot of money into the economy, and lots of jobs were opening up in South here, and we were paying people to move the rubble and make new roads. And so it's Haitians, you know, the whole answer is that Haitians don't want to migrate.
Okay, if there's any Republicans, I'm happy to yield time if they want more time. If not, I will yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Representative Stubbe. The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Representative Wild, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I'd like to direct my first question to Ambassador White. And, you know, we've been hearing a lot of frustration about the current state of things and money that continues to flow to Haiti and so forth. But I want to take a little bit of a historical tour with you. In 1825, France used the threat of military force to force Haiti to make massive financial payments with interest as a price for their independence, including the value of enslaved people freed. In today's dollars, the amount Haiti was forced to pay for its freedom exceeded $20 billion. So my questions to you are these, and I'll tell you my questions and then you can answer them in whatever fashion you wish. I'd like to know what the impact of these payments was on Haiti's development, and whether you believe that it's difficult to accurately assess Haiti's current structural challenges without factoring in that history. And I'd also like you to address the fact that in 2015, former French President Hollande acknowledged a moral debt toward Haiti, but I believe the debt is very tangible. And I'm wondering what you think France's responsibility is here, and whether we and other members of the international community should play a role in urging the French government to seriously address this issue. Yeah, that's for Ambassador White. Is she with us?
Ambassador White, could you hear the question? She's looking like she doesn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Okay, but we can't hear you. Yeah, could you start again?
Try again. Try again, Ambassador White. Go ahead.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? I'm not on mute.
I can hear you.
I'm not on mute.
Mr. Chair, can I reclaim a little bit of my time relative to—
Yeah, go ahead.
Ambassador, we can hear you. Go ahead, please. She can't hear me.
You can hear, let me stop the video.
Okay. Did you hear my question?
How can you hear? Yeah, I was always shocked. Yeah, I did.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was always shocked that Haiti was actually made to pay those reparations. It was amazing today. And it, you know, actually, interestingly enough, the French had played a role in Haiti, but they don't play a bigger role as you always thought that they probably would. During my time in West Africa, the French were the major donors and the major players in West Africa, and that's where their major international interest in the third world is today. So I just don't know enough about why France doesn't play a bigger role in Haiti, to tell you the truth, but they haven't for a long time.
Well, in your opinion, do you believe that we should be urging the French government to address this issue?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I'm going to move. I can't see the timer, Mr. Chair, but I assume I have another couple of minutes.
Yeah, another couple of minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to direct this to Ms. Joseph. Our immigration system has treated Haitians differently than immigrants of other nationalities in the region, particularly Cuba and Venezuela, including by limiting access to asylum. And we have not recognized historically Haitians as facing political persecution. Could you talk about how the U.S. response to Haitian migration has shaped our own immigration rules and processes?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Wild. The reality is we can look back, as I mentioned previously. The immigration prison system, as we know it, created for incarcerating Haitian refugees in the 1980s, fleeing political unrest and political abuse and persecution. And as we see today, the majority of the people who have fled are directly connected with political unrest, lack of security, and also the aftermath of the earthquake, the storms, the cholera that we continue to see today. So yes, as Black immigrants, we know very well how Haitian migrants, Haitian asylum seekers have always been treated unfairly. As we are looking today, we have Haitian migrants who have been waiting at the border between 1.5 years to 5 years. They have literally been waiting. The majority of the children that are being deported and expelled at the U.S.-Mexico border right now are people or children who were born on the way, whether in Brazil, in Chile, in Venezuela, and in Mexico. Yes, Black immigrants, particularly Haitian immigrants, have always been treated unfairly comparing to other people. So now you mentioned Venezuela. We applaud the administration providing TPS for Venezuela. As we are looking in the middle of the unrest and chaos, political unrest and chaos in Haiti, yet we do not see redesignation of TPS for Haiti. So we understand the anti-Black and racism is also ingrained in every system, in every part of who we are as a people, as a country. So that is why we are imploring and demanding that we break away from the same way of treating Haitian immigrants, understanding the value and what we as a people contribute to the United States. Going back to Chicago, to Istanbul, to today elected officials and people fighting on behalf of this nation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Now recognize for 5 minutes the gentlewoman from California, Congresswoman Kim.
Mute myself. I think I'm unmuted now.
There you go. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Levin. And I want to thank all of our witnesses for joining us today. You know, for years, as it's been noted, Haiti has been the second largest recipient of the U.S. assistance in the Western Hemisphere. We provided over $172 million allocated in fiscal year 2020. But despite these enormous amounts of financial assistance from multiple U.S. agencies and international relief organizations, Haiti remains the poorest and least developed nation in the Western Hemisphere. So question to you, Ms. Duan, could you provide insight as to which of our agencies is doing the most effective and efficient job in spending U.S. taxpayer dollars in raising that standard of living in Haiti? And additionally, which incentives are in need of reform or refocusing?
Thank you, Congresswoman Kim. I will let maybe someone like Ambassador White comment on the work of the United States government entities, but my comment will be that many people raised this concern about the amount of money sent to Haiti in terms of development assistance and the lack of results. And I'll say that it's not about the money, the amount of money you send to Haiti. It's about how it is spent, where it is spent, who get that money to do what. And there is a huge problem with the way we allocate aid in Haiti. It doesn't go to the real project. And this is also, it wasn't with the United States government money or United States taxpayer money, but it happened with Venezuela, the Petro Caribbeans. They help us, they send us a lot of money, and that money was mismanaged, and this was like the largest corruption scandal in the country. It will happen with any other kind of development assistance fund until we send clear signals that we are fighting corruption. And this is exactly what we are doing now in Haiti. And until we do that, you can send how many, the US can help send how much, whatever the amount of money they want, the same thing will happen.
Thank you so much. Given the limited time, I would like to pivot to Ambassador White. If you have any input on this, and can I hear your thoughts on this?
Yes, I think, like I said before, that tremendous amount of money that we're allocating to Haiti now is going to humanitarian aid, food aid, basic health aid, education, and I think that that's all critical. We do not give money to the Haitian government directly. We explored that. When I was there, we realized that there was just too much corruption in the government, and so we do not do that, and we shouldn't.
You know, I'd like to touch on the lack of infrastructure in Haiti impacting the accessibility to basic services. You know, as you say, we can pour as much money as we want into Haiti, but, and try to help them improve medical treatment or nutrition. But if Haitians are unable to reach food banks because of the poorly constructed roads or access adequate medical care due to poorly constructed hospitals, this money will be concentrated in the city centers and leave much of the country on its own. So how is the U.S. cooperating with Haiti on the infrastructure projects to ensure that aid reaches the populations that need it the most, and which agencies are best suited to accomplish this job? That's what you were doing.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I didn't know if you were asking me or not. I do not know currently what is going on in that direction in Haiti. I wish I did, but I don't. When I was there, the PEPFAR money that both AID and CDC ran, was doing a tremendous amount of trying to get money to every clinic across the nation. And we had at least 200 or 300 clinics that we were working with, increasing training to the nurses, getting the right drugs to these clinics. And I don't know if that's still ongoing or not. I believe that it is, but the problem is, just as you say, even if you have a clinic in village X, if people are having problems accessing that village, then you still have a problem. But any kind of infrastructure improvement of the roads is a multi-billion-dollar project, and there's just not enough money for that. Not U.S.
Let me put in one more question. I know I want to touch on the human rights situation. Ms. Auguste, as everyone here has testified, the human rights situation on the ground in Haiti is dire and unstable. The rise in violence against vulnerable populations through homicide, kidnappings, and sexual violence is clearly...
Representative Kim, your time has expired. It's really... do you have a very, very quick question for Ms. Auguste, like in 10 seconds?
The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stubbe, can I ask how much time he had left to yield?
His time's expired, Ms. Kim.
Okay, let me just correct. Yeah, may I finish my question then?
I'll come back to you if there's time at the end, but there's still a lot of people who want to ask questions.
All right, thank you.
That's okay. Yes, thanks so much. All right, and actually it's my turn now to ask my questions. I want to thank Chairman Meeks and Ranking Member McCall. I just can't tell you how pleased I am that the two of you called this hearing on the full committee level. I know that Chairman Series of the subcommittee agrees with me that a whole committee hearing shows a level of concern that's truly warranted for this crisis in Haiti. I want to make clear before I begin one thing for the record. I'm grateful to all the people who are testifying before us, and I know witnesses could face intimidation or threats because of your honest testimony. I have zero tolerance for that. And I request that any witness who experiences any form of retaliation for your testimony, please alert the committee immediately. Your willingness to appear and your candor are essential to our work, and your well-being is a priority for us. And I think I probably speak for every member here on that. Second, I want to emphasize that we've already made a little history in this hearing today. We have real bipartisan agreement here, which is often helpful and powerful in effective congressional input to change the direction of U.S. foreign policy. Our bipartisan panel of witnesses has made it perfectly clear that both a constitutional referendum and elections organized under de facto President Moïse will not work and will not be seen as legitimate by the Haitian people. Ranking Member McCall stated in his usual straightforward way his agreement with this position. So this hearing is truly providing the basis for a new way forward for U.S. policy. The panel has already made clear that Haitian civil society broadly considers Mr. Moïse's term to have ended on February 7, 2021, that he's widely considered illegitimate by the Haitian people, that the CEP he created unilaterally is not legal or legitimate, and that Haiti needs not simply elections, but the conditions that can lead to legitimate elections. The United States needs to stop talking about squabbling between politicians and listen to human rights, business, labor, legal, and other civil society groups. These groups are actually trying to come together to create a plan that would work to restore the rule of law and a path to democracy. So, following Congresswoman Bass, let's talk about the way forward. Ms. Douillon, can you briefly explain how Haiti has had transitional governments before and what a broad cross-section of Haitian groups believe should happen now?
Thank you, Congressman Levin. We've had transitional government before because even in the past, elected leaders failed to organize elections, timely election. So we had to fill the void. And we had it in 2004, we had it in 2015, and this time around is the same problem. Dr. Moïse, despite the fact that he enjoyed a comfortable majority in parliament, failed to organize election. So now we have to replace the parliament, We have to elect local officials, and we have to elect a new president because his term ended. So a transitional government will have restored democratic order, will help improve the overall security situation, and organize election. And
can I just ask? I don't know if Ms. Auguste is still here, but if so, I'd like her to weigh in my last minute on whether she, if she can add to what you said, or whether she agrees with you, to see if the panel broadly agrees on this. Can you hear me? Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Oui, bien sûr, moi entendez-vous très bien. Merci un peu, Congressman Leva.
I hear you very well. Thank you very much, Congressman Leva.
Je commencer par menace pour se parler là, pour dire que nous-mêmes, par exemple, dans la société civile, la militante droits mondiaux, effectivement, nous intimider de manière générale.
I would like to start with the threats, especially those of us who are in the human rights community generally.
Mais cependant, situation, monde qui décide mettre tête ensemble pour défendre droit dans la saline avec toute l'autre quartier défavorisé, yo plus menacé que nous.
However, the people who are living in the impoverished communities who pull themselves together to stand against the human rights violations and against this unconstitutional government are more threatened than us.
Deuxième bagage c'est que nous vraiment, nous-mêmes au niveau de société civile, nous croyons que ces communautés internationales là qui kembe Jovenel Moïse côté lumière.
One thing that I would like to emphasize on is that us within the Haitian civil society, we realize that it is the international community that allows Jovenel Moïse to continue to remain at the palace.
Impunité a tellement grand que, par exemple, Fednel Moncheri, yo arrêté le 13 février 2021, li impliqué dans le massacre la Saline, mais yo la gueule immédiatement.
The impunity is so daring that on February 13, they arrested Fednel Moncheri, who has already been cited in the La Saline massacre. They released him a few hours thereafter.
Ça veut dire nous pas qu'à compter sous équipe ça parce que Jean président mixte dit là, Jovenel Moïse perdu toute crédibilité devant pays, devant population.
That means we cannot count on this government to provide security and ensure that the population gets what they need. Like Ranking Chairman Mix have said before, the president, former President Jovenel Moïse have lost all credibility and is not able to govern the country.
All right, I'm afraid my time has expired, and I'm going to hold myself to the same rules. So if we have time later, Ms. Auguste will come back to you. And now my understanding is there are not currently any of our Republican colleagues who wish to ask questions. And that means I get to turn it over to my esteemed colleague from Pennsylvania, Representative Houlihan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Representative Levin, and I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. My first question is for Ms. Doyon. I was hoping to be able to dive a little bit deeper into the role that women can play in policy discussions in Haiti around governance and around constitutional reform. And how can we here in the U.S. and in this body help to promote women's participation in the government, in the Haitian government and its civil society?
Thank you, Congresswoman Houlihan. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly.
You did.
And as a feminist myself, I believe women have a large role to play in Haiti politics. And this is actually the case already, but much is needed to be done. And I also need to acknowledge that several feminist organizations with concern over the situation in Haiti, the current situation in Haiti. Women need to be represented in the Electoral Council. But what happened is that respected organizations refused to adhere to a process that was legal, and the government picked some other women from organizations that no one knows about to constitute that Electoral Council. And what happened is that you have organizations that are legitimate, recognized, that have been on the ground for many years. They are not involved and they are left behind in the process. And they keep saying it, and they released several press notes. And we believe the civil society in their plan to have a transitional government actually specified that there need to be a quota of women because several times they violated this. It's the law. We need to have at least 30% of women, but many times they violate this law. They don't respect this quota, and they are advocating for it. And we believe, and even for the new constitution, that process, because it's not legal, those respective organizations are not involved. But in the future, when the society will agree to make change to the constitution, maybe we will have provision for increased women participation in Haiti politics.
Is there anything that you can think of that we can be doing to be helpful in driving that process?
Yes, first of all, maybe you can question why those legitimate organizations are not involved and how you can have or you can do anything without including women and those who have been defending women's rights in the country for so many years. And I think we can start here and later making sure that whether it is in terms of development assistance or anything or any decision that is being taken, if women are on the table, because it is very important that we do not have the kind of situation where only men are deciding what's the fate of the country. And I have to note that there is something really positive happening with the young activists. Organization like mine has many women involved, and we are actually showing that we are equally qualified and we can have like leadership position. We can assume our responsibility just like men, and there is no reason we shouldn't have equal opportunities.
Agreed. And I'm not sure, Representative Levin, how much more time that I have.
1:20.
All right, great. With my 1:20, I'd like to direct my last question to Ms. Auguste. My question is, how can we best be utilizing our relationships in Latin America and the Caribbean to help support democracy in Haiti? What can we be doing to be helpful there, and what international organizations are most useful? And thank you.
Avec les États-Unis?
She's just getting the translation.
Ok, merci en pile Congresswoman pour la haine. Nous pensons que les États-Unis effectivement il y a un pile bagay que sont capable de faire pour changer relation avec Haïti.
Thank you, Congresswoman Houlihan. I think there's a lot of things that the youth can do to change their relationships with Haiti.
Mais premier bagay que nous pensons, faut que c'est effectivement administration américaine mettez-li à l'écoute de société civile là qui gagne un pile que le cap partager avec nous.
First and foremost, I think the U.S. administration needs to listen to the Haitian civil society, who have a lot of recommendations and demand that we can share with them that can be significant to the change that we are seeking.
Et avec permission, moi t'aimerais rebondir sur question participation femme dans l'élection.
With your permission, I would like to quickly address the issue of women's participations within the elections system.
Representative Levin, I don't know if I have the time for that, but perhaps we could go back to that.
No, you have a bit of time left.
Okay, great.
It's a little different when there's translation because they stop the clock for the translation.
Oh, okay,
So don't worry. Well, I'll stop you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Ok, merci. Et donc, ce que je veux dire rapidement, c'est que la situation d'insécurité nous vient qu'on y a là, pas permettre aux femmes de participer dans l'élection, ni en tant que candidate, ni en tant qu'électrice.
One thing that I would like to add is that the current insecurity that we have will not allow women to participate in this election, neither as candidates or as voters.
Et même genre tout parti politique c'est eux même qui pour venir avec des propositions, des mécanismes pour permettre que les femmes puissent participer dans la question électorale.
At the same time, the Haitian political parties have to come and put forward the mechanisms to allow women to be able to participate fully in the electoral process.
With that, I think we have to move on. I'm sorry. Again, if we have more time, we'll come back. It's such a rich conversation. And I will just point out that all four of our panelists and our translator are women, and they're doing an outstanding job in this hearing, whatever that means. And Mr. Fitzpatrick, if you have questions, you are up next, or if you want to wait, because I know you just popped on.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. If Representative Young Kim is still on, I'm happy to yield my time to her. I know she was.
Yes, she was. I don't know if she is or not. If I don't see her name, we'll wait a minute. All right, well, we can come back to that as well. So let me recognize the gentlewoman from Nevada, Representative Titus, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been indeed an interesting conversation. And I'd like to shift a little bit to maybe Ms. Joseph and ask her about the refugee situation. One of President Biden's first actions in office was to sign an executive order rescinding some of Trump administration's immigration enforcement policies. And he also directed Homeland Security to re-examine our own policies and priorities. DHS instituted a 100-day pause on deportations with limited exceptions during this review process, but a legal challenge unfortunately lifted that pause, so deportations are continuing. I just wonder if the Haitian government is doing anything to ensure the return of individuals, many of whom left saying they feared for their lives because of the gang violence throughout the country.
Even when President Biden's moratorium did not cover the expulsion of migrants under Title 42, which is the CDC title, and we are asking for that title to be rescinded so that we can provide protection for the most vulnerable people. I also would like to mention that it is extremely concerning for the Haitian president, for the Haitian government to be agreeing to receive people who have literally fled due to violence, due to political unrest, and due to persecution. As I mentioned during my first opening, one of the women who was kidnapped and raped and fled was returned to Haiti and is currently in hiding, unable to leave her house because of fear that what will happen to her. So with all of that being said, what's happening with the migration, what's happening at the border, with the deportation, with the expulsion, we are asking for all of that to stop because it is unbelievable. And we believe that it is borderline criminal for the Haitian government to be receiving people in these conditions at the present moment. And also would like to highlight that even people who were not born in Haiti have been deported to Haiti. We are demanding accountability on both sides, on the U.S. side and the Haitian side, understanding it is a sending and receiving a relationship, and we're asking for that to stop immediately.
So are NGOs involved in that whole process with you, either through the courts or in legal cases, or advocating for some of these people who have returned?
We are advocating, however, when people are returned to Haiti, it's extremely impossible for them to get any type of relief. When they are returned, released with nothing, and they have to find a way to fend for themselves, to go into hiding, to try to find another way so that they can probably even leave the country again. There's absolutely no relief, no protection for people who are being returned to Haiti at this moment.
Sounds like that's something that we may be able to look into to provide some help at our end.
We definitely have, not just look, but we must provide help now, and we must provide, a way for people to legally, safely get protection in asking asylum. We must, with designated TPS for Haiti, to cover those who are here and really to make sure that we have a strong Haitian American community.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit of time left. I'd like to ask about education in Haiti. We have the figure that 1 of every 2 Haitians aged 15 and over is illiterate. Yet we know education is the way to get out of poverty, to create a better future. Is there anything that we can do to help help NGOs or help any of you help with expanding education opportunities?
Merci en pile. Congresswoman Titus. Et effectivement, je dis à question éducation, même genre avec toute l'autre question de harmonie, c'est un problème.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Teachers. Today, education is a problem, just like all the other issues that we are dealing with.
Et effectivement, nous avons un système éducatif qui n'a pas ni bonnes conditions d'apprentissage pour les enfants et qui n'a pas tout un système égal pour tout le monde ait même accès à droit à l'éducation.
The current educational system we have does not provide a good system for everybody to learn adequately, and it also is not a system that is fair to able to address everyone's problems regarding of whatever discrepancies or challenges that they have.
Mais ça qui est plus grave là, en fait, c'est que nous gagnons tout un système qui est corrompu parce que gagnons l'argent qui était décidé pour être capable de mettre dans la question éducation et régime PHTK nous n'a jamais aucune information sur l'utilisation de l'argent ça.
We also have a system that is corrupted because there was the National Educational Fund that was created by the Martelly government. Money is taken from the Haitian diaspora on a regular basis. No report has been given on that money, and it has not been utilized to assist the Haitian children who needs to be attending school.
And again, I need to step in and say the gentlewoman's time has expired, but again, that answer is on such an important question. And I understand, thanks, Representative Titus, I understand that even school children now are being, at risk of kidnappings, which is just incredible. Now let me recognize my wonderful colleague from the state of Minnesota for 5 minutes, Representative Omar, for her questions.
Thank you so much for calling this important meeting, Chairman. I'm especially grateful that we have the opportunity to hear directly from folks who are being impacted by our policies. I wanted to start with, direct my question to Ms. Augusta. The last president changed U.S. policy to make it easier for American gun manufacturers to export guns to other countries, including Haiti. Many of us are pushing for our new president to reverse this. In Haiti, how do gangs and organized crime get their guns? And do these guns used to commit violence in Haiti mostly come from the United States?
Merci en pile, Congresswoman, pour commencer à répondre.
I will start by answering your question.
Et effectivement, gagné en pile d'armes qui rentraient sur le territoire haïtien et qui sortent aux États-Unis.
Yes, there are a lot of weapons that arrive on the Haitian territory that comes from the U.S.
Ils rentrent particulièrement dans port.
They come through our different various ports.
Il faut que nous disions que il y a des séries de l'autre armes qui rentraient et qui passaient sous frontières. Parce que je ne dis pas port à frontières, c'est de véritables passoires que nous.
There are also other weapons that enter the country through our borders because both our ports and the borders are just open.
Je ne dis pas gagner une résolution qui prend et que Haïti pas doit rentrer des armes.
There was a resolution that was taken that Haiti should not be entering weapons in the country.
Et malgré embargo ça, ZAM a monté descendre et pas aucune autorité qui a clairement dit combien ZAM qui nommait bandits armés.
Despite the fact that there is an armed embargo on Haiti, to this day, no authorities in the Haitian government can tell us where these weapons are coming from and who's entering them in the country.
Mais c'est bandits armés qui toujours dit que sont mieux armés eux-mêmes que même police nationale là, et c'est peut-être ça nous dit que police nationale là est affaiblie et c'est vous. Merci.
It is the gangs who said that they are better armed than the Haitian National Police, and that is why we are saying that the Haitian National Police is currently weakened and politicized.
Your answer. And to Ms. Dion, should the United States be supporting elections in Haiti this year, regardless of the context? And in your opinion, what are the changes that election in Haiti this year, what are the chances that the elections this year would be free, fair, and legitimate?
Thank you, Congresswoman Omar. If the United States want to waste money and solve the new political crisis, yes, they can invest in election in Haiti this year. Otherwise, the best alternative would be to listen to civil society who could indicate when it is okay to hold election. Because with gangs member, with a president that is acting like a strong man, and clear violations of human rights, and many areas that are under gang control, there isn't any possibility we could have fair and inclusive election. Who can campaign without gang support? And we don't want the kind of official that have gang support to be elected. But if we organize election now, those people are the ones who have more advantage by the current insecurity and the climate of fear that is going on in Haiti. And also, we need to audit the electoral system, and we have an illegal electoral council. All those problems need to be solved if we want to have elections that could lead us to the change that the Haitian people deserve.
Really appreciate your answer. And to Ms. Joseph, I know that you've just addressed this question in regards to deportations. I'm wondering if you can maybe expand on how these deportations are impacting the situation on the ground in Haiti, especially in the context of the COVID pandemic.
Thank you so much for being here. The reality is we started asking to stop deportation and expulsions to Haiti under Title 42 back in March, when we realized that was going to be a major catastrophe for Haiti with a lack of infrastructure for medical care. And I also want to highlight that the numbers that are being seen or reported are not actual numbers. So in Haiti, there is no way for people to literally know how many people have been affected and died from COVID for many different reasons. However, we also understand that in May of 2020, we had words that at least 3 of those people who were deported to Haiti, upon arriving in Haiti, tested positive for COVID-19. And I personally saw a spike in COVID-19 as relation to this flight. We also understand that a lot of people that were deported to Guatemala also were tested positive for COVID-19 upon arrival in the home country. So this is a major concern as we understand transfers between detention centers and prisons and flights carries over the grave injustice that can be seen when it comes to medical assistance and medical care. So that is why we're asking for the stopping of those expulsion and those deportation in the spirit of good neighborhood, in the spirit of protecting and healthcare.
Thank you all for your wonderful insights. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlewoman yields back now to the first of our fabulous fresh women, the gentlewoman from California, Representative Jacobs.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here. This has been incredibly interesting, and I share my colleagues' concerns about the current situation. But I wanted to ask Ms. Doyon a question. I too have been part of conversations around Haiti for many years where we've been having similar conversations over and over again. But I noticed that in your opening, you said that you think this is not the same moment as other crises and that we have an opportunity to fundamentally change things. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on why you think that's the case and what specifically it would take so that this really would fundamentally change things and we would not continue this cycle.
Thank you, Congresswoman Jacobs. I think we can only go back to maybe the time when we were fighting dictatorship to find the same spirit that is going on in Haiti now. That call for change, that the involvement of so many different kind of people. For example, I'm speaking on behalf of NOU PAP DOMI, a collective of engaged citizens who've never done politics before. We were never involved so actively in activism. But back in 2018, we've noticed that something needed to be done. Like we needed to be involved to save what is left to be saved of Haiti. And this is what we are. This is why we are doing it, and we've been doing it constantly since 2018. And this is because of people like us in NOU PAP DOMI, the faithful challenger, those people who fought dictatorship and are still fighting the rise of dictatorship. Now that I believe that something different is happening, we are tired. Like no one wants to keep going with the same cycle. And it's obvious that the system that we are fighting can no longer renew itself. For like 4 years in power, the president, despite the fact that he has a comfortable majority, he hasn't been able to achieve anything. Like he hasn't been able to satisfy any need from the population. And he doesn't even have like supporters to go on the street to say, we are with him, we are supporting him. Like everyone realized that like the majority of people, there is a broad consensus that we need to change something if we want to develop this country. And I believe that this new era can start now. And this is why we're asking for the US government to recognize that the civil society is taking the lead, to recognize that this time around is different and they need to be on the side of change.
Thank you so much. And then I'd like to ask if Ambassador White is still on, what she thinks the United States can learn from its previous interventions and in terms of how we should approach things differently. And, you know, I know you talked about conditioning aid and some other things, but I guess what I'm just trying to make sure is that we don't like do the same 10 things we've done in every think tank report we've had since the earthquake, and then have this same hearing again in 3 years from now when it doesn't work.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think we have a unique opportunity right now to get tough. And, you know, when I look back, even during the, you know, some of the final months of when I was in Haiti, because we were going through the same, you know, the powers, there was no parliament, the CEP was first made up of a cast of characters that weren't acceptable, but we got it right, finally. But I think we have to hold their feet to the fire, and we have to be tough, and we have to be outspoken. And I think the Biden administration is ready to do that. I hope so. But let me just mention one other thing that I, during this hearing, couldn't tell if it was a Republican or a Democrat asking the questions. And I'm really good at that. So congratulations to you, because I really do feel that this was a bipartisan committee hearing. And thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
And I believe Mr. Meeks is back to take the gavel back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. I now recognize the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee of the Middle East, North Africa, and Global Counterterrorism, Representative Kathy Manning of North Carolina, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Meeks. I want to thank all of the witnesses for their testimony today. And I'm delighted that we've had this hearing so early in this session of Congress. The situation that was described by all of our witnesses is heartbreaking and discouraging. And we've talked at length about the political situation. Ambassador White, you had some very specific suggestions of things that could be done to address the political situation. And I'm wondering if you have similarly specific recommendations for steps the U.S. could take to improve the economic situation in Haiti.
Yeah, I do. I think overall, USA, it's always been my contention that we should spend more money on getting people jobs, because countries don't move forward without jobs. But in order to get people into jobs, we need to do some pay attention to at least giving people skills that they can use to rebuild the country. And when I was head of USAID in Korea, we had this fabulous program that linked literacy skills with basic skills in electricity and brick making and building with car mechanics, et cetera, so that we taught people literacy at the same time. We were training them in basic skills with related skills. And that Congress has been over and over very reluctant to give money to job training skills. And I think that's a mistake.
Would any of the other witnesses like to comment on that? I'm looking for specific ways the U.S. Can help improve the economic situation in Haiti.
Representative Manning, if you allow, I would like to add a few points. If we want to improve the economic situation in Haiti, there is a need to attract investment, but we cannot attract investment if the current president is still undermining rule of law, and if the overall security situation is still as bad as it is. This is why so many people don't come to invest in Haiti, and we cannot have like people in the diaspora coming back home to improve, to work, to invest. And this is when we cannot dissociate the economic situation from the political and social situation. And I believe we should improve and solve this political crisis if we want to attract investment, restore peace, so that economic activities can thrive. Because what's happening now with people like fearing to even leave their house, there is great concern that we could see any improvement anytime soon.
Thank you. Yes.
That again, we need, as my peers, Justice Warrior Emmanuel mentioned, we need to look at the root causes of where we are right now, and really, work with the people of Haiti to create the infrastructure that is needed in order for us to move forward, including education, including access to healthcare, including rebuilding agriculture, upon which Haiti has always flourished. Sending rice to Haiti, sending all those things that are literally diminish the farming industry. We need to look into building sustainable structural in Haiti, from education to access to healthcare, to farming, to agriculture, so that we, as the Haitian people, can reclaim their place and really create a system where people will be able to stay at home, safe, and others can come in and then investing into the community as well.
Thank you. And Ms. Justino, would you like to comment on that as well?
Yeah. Oui, merci un peu, Congresswoman Manning. En fait, sous situation économique pays, il est directement lié avec situation crise sociopolitique.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Manning. The economic situation is currently tied to the social political crisis that we are dealing with.
Et depuis pas gain instabilité politique, pas gain instabilité économique, et au contraire, a gagné plus monde, Jean Joseph avec Emmanuel Asodili, qui pourrait quitter pays à aller dans l'autre pays.
If you don't have political stability, you cannot have economic stability, just like my colleague Joseph and Douillon have already explained.
Et donc, d'abord, c'est reconnaître, je me dis, que selon l'article 134-2 Constitution, mandat Jovenel Moïse fini et permet que nous gagnions stabilité politique dans le pays pour nous gagner stabilité économique. Merci.
The first step we need to take in terms of changing the economic situations in Haiti, Article 134-2 from the Constitution, that the mandate for former President Moïse has on February 7, 2021, then the country can work toward buildings.
Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. This time has expired. I recognize the Vice Chair, Subcommittee on Western Hemisphere, Civilian Security, Migration, and International Economic Policy, Representative Juan Vargas, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I hope, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you very much for this hearing. Being towards the end here, I've had the opportunity to listen to not only our presenters, but also all the questions from our colleagues. I have to tell you, I don't know what we should do. I really don't. But I know that what we should not do, we should not deport Haitians back to Haiti. That's what we should not do. We shouldn't do that. And why shouldn't we do that? From all the testimony that we heard here, people are afraid to go buy groceries. People are afraid to pay money to get on the bus. People are afraid to make even small buys of anything because the gangs figure out they have money and they'll get kidnapped to take that money away. They've closed some of the schools, not so much even for the fear of COVID-19, but because children and their parents get kidnapped. We should not deport people back into that situation. That's outrageous. The administration should allow them to stay and until the situation changes in Haiti. Now, I have to say also, in my own opinion, I could be wrong, but I think it's also discrimination. And I think it's discrimination because Haitians are Black. I think that that's a reality. I think that there's a terrible discrimination going on here. It shouldn't happen. So anyway, I think we should urge the administration to quit deporting people back to Haiti. I mean, does anyone agree with me at all? I mean, how about Ms. Duyan? Do you agree that we shouldn't deport people back to Haiti?
I agree that given the conditions in Haiti right now, it's not fair and to deport people back to Haiti. And if we really want to avoid dealing with this kind of situation, like having people migrating illegally to the United States, we need to support efforts to restore peace in Haiti and make Haiti livable for the people.
And I agree with that. I mean, I think we need to do all we can to help Haiti. I'm completely in favor of that. I just don't understand why we're deporting Haitians back to Haiti in these conditions. That doesn't make any sense to me. That doesn't make any sense. And also, we've been talking about how to have fair and free elections, that, you know, we can't trust the situation it is right now to have free and fair elections. I agree with that. I think that'll take some time to sort out. But in the meantime, why are we deporting people? Now, that doesn't make any sense to me, and that's something I think that we should put pressure on this administration. This administration has the opportunity to do that. I mean, they do it for Cubans, they do it for Venezuelans, for others. Why not for Haitians?
Congressman Vargas, thank you so much for those points. The reality is we absolutely believe that it is anti-Black racism play a big part of why people are being deported to Haiti, and also the fact that we continue to see some type of support to the current administration in Haiti. And as I mentioned before, it is borderline criminal for both, you know, the U.S. sending people and for Haiti to be receiving people. We are asking, as you have said, to provide a safe and welcoming a plan for those people who have left, who have run, and have literally been at the border between 1.5 years to 5 years. It is unconscionable to see the condition that Black people continues to be treated, not only in the United States, but around the world. And we see a direct relation between how they are deporting people to Haiti under the rules of Title 42, which literally allow people to be tested negative before being deported based on what ICE is saying. It is absolutely no reason for the United States, after President Biden promised the Haitian American community that he was going to lead the way. We cannot continue to repeat those inhumane treatment of Haitians. It is unacceptable.
Amen. And I would add this too. If I live on the border here in San Diego, the discrimination that goes also in Mexico when Haitians arrive here also is terrible. The discrimination that they face in Mexico when they have every right to present themselves at the border and say, I'm here for asylum and apply for asylum. Anyway, I hope we can do something about this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. Our last member to talk is the distinguished chair of the Financial Services Committee, who has been an advocate for Haiti from the time that I have known her. And that's why she spent the time here today, the Honorable Maxine Waters. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am so pleased for the leadership that you're providing on this issue. I'm a friend of Haiti, and I've been for years, and I've been through some of the better times, but all of the worst times. I know Andy up ahead, and I know he's down there exploiting the people still. I have to get Guy Philippe put in jail, and Toto Consant that they've sent back here to the United States, who we should have kept here. He was the death squad leader under Cedras when that coup d'etat took place. I've been with Aristide. I rented a plane along with Randall Robinson. Remember when we had Trans-Africa, Mr. Chairman, and we rented a jet and we went up and we got Aristide. And I brought him back from the African Republic that he was Central African Republic that he had been banished to. Now, knowing all of this, I also understand Haiti, and I understand the mulattoes elite, and I understand their relationship to some of the worst people in government, and that's who Moise and all of them work with, because they're all about the money, exploiting Haiti, and basically about the fraud and about the corruption. I get all of that. But I want you to know that, you know, people are being killed. The last time I was there, it was April 2019, and I met with the victims of La Saline, the massacre that took place. And they told me about everything that happened November of 2018. And this was all because they were part of Lavalas. And so, you know, that's the old party of President Aristide that was so prominent in trying to get democracy in Haiti. Someone asked today about what was going to be done or what had ever been done about the fact that the French basically piled all of this debt on Haiti and what was going to be done to work in getting that back. Well, that's one of the reasons Aristide was ousted, was because he was talking about stuff like that. But I want to tell you that there have been a lot of reports of similar massacres, such as the one that was held in La Saline. I met with people whose houses had been burned down. They had no place to go. All they had was the clothing on their back. And so whether we're talking about Bel Air or we're talking about Cité Soleil, all of them are under absolute, you know, violence that has been perpetrated on them by this president and his police force. In May of last year, the death squad that was headed by Jimmy Cherizier, but everybody knows him as Barbecue. He's running wild down there. He's killing people. He's carried out multiple attacks on civilians all through the Port-au-Prince neighborhoods of Tokyo, Delmas, Pont Rouge, burning houses and killing people. And during these violent attacks, members of the Haitian National Police allied with Barbecue reportedly stood by and did nothing. No one has been accountable for these killings either. So there's a lack of accountability. Now, I know the question has been raised, what can we do? Mr. Chairman, I think you're in a great position to help provide some leadership. I don't know exactly how it should take place, but I think there are some recommendations that may make good sense. Number one, the State Department is very key. I realize Haiti is a sovereign nation. We can't just go in there and tell them what to do and what not to do, what have you. But we do support Haiti, and we do have a State Department there. And so they've got to be involved in some way. The other thing is this. France and Canada, I've seen them involved when they thought it was in their best interest to be involved. But I think if Canada and France, the State Department, the United States government, led by you, and the civil society of Haiti get together and form some kind of a task force of some kind, you've got to get President Moïse to stop this April referendum. This cannot happen. This will destroy any efforts to have a constitution, it will undermine the Constitution of Haiti. I mean, this has got to be stopped. And if everybody can get together, and maybe some people from the diaspora, along with civil society and with the State Department, the UN and you and others, maybe we can stop this referendum. It has got to stop. Now, when you talk about some of the people in civil society, Dr. Marie Antoinette Gautier, Marie-Louise Gautier, these people are all in jail. They picked them up in the middle of the night and took them to jail. Louise Bateau, and of course, the Supreme Court Justice, Guy Purcell, he was arrested also, but they let him go on his own recognizance. But the rest of them are still in jail, and they're talking about they're going to stay there for 90 days until they can decide what to do with them. But in response, and I don't know, but I worked with one of the past prime ministers, Sayant, I guess, was up for a while, and somehow he got kicked out by Mosaic. I don't know what he's doing. But between those of you who are here today, some of the names that I am mentioning, and with some of the people that you trust in civil society, get together, and everybody says to Moise, you will not have this referendum. It will not take place. I think then there can be a start to deal with how to follow the Constitution, how to get a legitimate CEP, and how to go forward with elections. The ambassador is correct, Ambassador Wright. You cannot have it in this atmosphere. There's no way it can take place. And all the international interests should contribute the resources that are necessary at the right time, stopping this referendum and making him step aside. You know, he is the president, but if everybody comes together and say, you cannot do this. That's not kicking him out as president, but the people will do that when you get the elections going and you have him step aside and stop the referendum. And so I just wanted to add that I love Haiti. I will visit Haiti with my friends, and I know that this is not political, but I'm Lavalas. That's it. That's what I've worked with. I love President Aristide. He is building a university there that is educating doctors and lawyers, and it's fabulous. When I was there was over 500 or 600 graduates that were coming from that university. We can do this, but we've got to come together with all of the interests. We've got to stop him in his tracks. We've got the international community to come together and supply the dollars and move with an election in an atmosphere where people won't be killed. And with that, I know that I've taken up enough time. I'd like to submit for the record a letter that I sent to U.S. Ambassador Michelle Sisson that was signed by 14 of us, and an op-ed that I wrote in the Miami Herald entitled Haiti's President Jovenel Moïse's shameful assault on democracy. And I'd just like to say that include CARICOM in that group of people who will get together. So that was 3 letters that I have sent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to follow your lead. I'm going to do what I know you can. I'm support you in what I know you can do. And I think you have to take the leadership in having to bring this group of people together. As I said, civil society will be central to that. But all of these others who play a role, I think we can force him to step aside while we get together to plan an election. Thank you so much. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The lady's time has expired. All questions have now been had, and all questions are now concluded. I now call upon Ranking Member McCall if you have any comments before we close. In closing, let me do this. I don't think Ranking McCall is with us. I want to thank all of our witnesses today. Number one, your insight has been invaluable. I want to thank all the members of this committee who've been engaged on this critical situation in Haiti. There is clearly a lot of work to be done, and we're going to need to stay focused on Haiti. And I want all that have been witnessing and listening to this hearing today to know that this committee is going to stay focused. This is not just a one hearing and off, and then we're not going to continue to pay attention to what's going on. I too, as I said in my opening statement, am very concerned about moving forward with a referendum and what the current makeup of is the CEP. Because we have to have free and fair elections that involves everyone. Civil society must be a part of this. The Haitian people must have confidence in an election. You can't have an election just for election's sake because we will still be in the same place. There's got to be integrity. So this committee will work with the State Department and the administration, bringing folks together so that we will know that there will be a change from what's going on. For the Haitian people face a big deal. And it's a priority of mine that we work to elevate the voices of civil society who want democracy and the rule of law. And I thank each and every one of you for being with us today. And I now adjourn this hearing.
Voilà, chers amis, ou même qui sous Global Media 28 qui tap suivre audience ça, une audience spéciale aujourd'hui dans le Kongrè, comme dit son audience virtuelle, puisque nous capables de constater son audience qui fait via Zoom, via Webex, côté gain parlementaire, c'est la CAIOT, donc mais virtuellement, donc c'est Komsyon Afè Etranjè Kongrè qui est réuni pour être capable d'entendre des recommandations plusieurs monde et parmi eux nous gagnons ancienne anbasadris Pamela White qui travaille dans le pays d'Haïti, qui représenté diplomatie américaine dans le pays d'Haïti. Il était présent, nous, qui recommandation le fait, et était gagné et représentant trois organisations dans la société civile dans le pays d'Haïti. Nous voulons parler de Emmanuel Douillon, qui est une organisation NOU PAP DOMI, ancien leader organisation et Petro Challengers. T'es gagné tout Marie-Auguste Auguste du Sénat, directrice programme réseau national cap défendre droit monde en Haïti, et puis t'es gagné tout et yon responsable Bridge Alliance qui sont organisation tout cap défendre droit immigrant yo, donc c'est Mounsa yo Gerline Joseph pour être plus précis, qui c'est présidente Haitian Bridge Alliance, donc yo tap tendé nous entendez, il y a vraiment un pile recommandation qui fait, il y a un pile dossier au touché, il y a été fait un peu du coq à l'âne, c'est-à-dire parler de différents dossiers, mais ouais, à un certain moment, il y a été quand même entendu plus focus sur dossier Haïti en termes de élection, faisabilité élection et référendum mois d'avril que Jovenel Moïse et compté fait, il était parlé de CEP, donc on essaie de résumer pour ça qui concerne l'élection, il y a tout d'accord que conditions pas réunies pour élection réalisée dans le pays d'Haïti, pour quelle raison? Premièrement, et parce que il dit que le président qui l'a mandat fini et constitutionnellement fini, ça c'est un. Deuxième raison, et instabilité politique là, insécurité, kidnapping, les acteurs politiques qui sont impliqués dans l'élection, yo pas qu'à faire ça, puisque à cause de climat insécurité, à cause de 60% électorat, c'est gang qui contrôle, toute zone et côté et monde à l'élection, c'est sous contrôle gang, donc pour toute raison ça kidnapping là, peur là, et donc tout ça, et c'est des raisons valables pour montrer, pour dire États-Unis, eh bien, conditions pas réunies pour élection et si vous voulez financer des élections, donc il faut que y ait tant que conditions réunies pour organiser l'élection dans le pays d'Haïti. Et il y a une suggestion qui est faite, vous attendez, c'est Madame Pamela White, ancienne ambassadrice dans Port-au-Prince, eh bien, qui reconnaît que situation pas bon dans le pays. Situation climat sécuritaire là et question droit monde etc. donc li étaler tout point ça yo et li font proposition qu'on entendait lui même li estimer que une solution qui passait par le ministre haïtien Joseph Jout et bien c'est une proposition passée qui était capable de kakembe et bien sûr Joseph Jout d'après ça madame Pamela White suggéré et bien elle était capable de faire dialogue là parce qu'il parlait de summit with the opposition. Donc, c'est ça, monsieur Relé, dans le langage créole, par un dialogue national, et dialogue national là, et puis qu'on y a organisé l'élection, donc, ouais, nous, son position liée. Est-ce que, va le proposition ça? Est-ce que, position ça, il va le faire tâche d'huile? Eh bien, nous pas qu'on est, cependant, une solution pareille, et il pas le gagner pour parler plus de lui pour dans quelle mesure opposition d'accord une position comme ça donc son gros je veux dire son gros jour passé pour un pile monde capable d'accord que son jour important nous est dans conclusion Grégory Mick qui c'est président Komsyon Afè Etranjè il promet il va gommer pour défendre le peuple américain excusez-moi il va gommer pour défendre le peuple haïtien du bec et des ongles et pour lui travailler main dans la main avec le département d'État américain puis prendre les bonnes décisions pour Haïti et surtout nous Maxine Waters député californien lui-même il fait qu'on est député Maxine Waters eh bien il fait qu'on est que il va camper en quoi mais toute balance li toute poids li pour sous balance pour empêcher que le référendum ça fait son désastre à pied et puis surtout pour que la communauté internationale, citer des pays clés, la France, États-Unis, Canada, tout pays ça yo, qui supportent Jovenel Moïse, eh bien, pour être capable d'empêcher que le référendum, en fait, pour prendre les bonnes décisions pour le peuple haïtien, pour pas supporter le gouvernement Jovenel Moïse a dit que mandat fini, son président mandat fini, FINI, et son président tout, qui doit mettre toute pression pour forcer le bail d'émission qui était pouvoir. Ça me résumer pour nous et déclaration plusieurs parlementaires qui participaient dans audience ou audience virtuelle, une audience qui était attirant pile attention, un pile monde tape suivi. Donc c'est ensemble de recommandations ça yo. Donc et Grégory Mick fait qu'on est que travail n'est pas fini et yo promettre lui-même avec reste membre commission pour mettre pour yo un travail quand même pour yo capable jouer une position harmonisée avec département d'État sous dossier haïtien. Donc une audience 12 mars là, une audience virtuelle, c'est Komsyon Afè Etranjè chambre député donc qui sont commission bipartisan qui réunit et des démocrates et des républicains sous dossier haïtien. Donc nous dans des points de vue Emmanuel Adouillon, il dit faut que t'attendez yo ta chita avec acteurs, l'autre acteur politique, une opposition de société civile là, pour tendre message qu'a véhiculé à moment pas propice pour élection faite parce que conditions pas réunies. Donc c'est ça l'idée, c'est ça lui-même, il fait qu'on est il parler de violation de droit monde, il parler de terreur systématique à prier dans zone de non-droit, dans zone que gang contrôle il fait qu'on est moun ça au pire en danger que yo même que leader politique. Donc c'est même question impunité à tout, faiblesse la police si nous changer tout point ça yo. Donc ils sont faiblesse voulue que police n'a faible et dans moment et donc de toute façon c'est gang yo qui en contrôle. Donc l'autre position, l'autre question c'est surtout question violation de droit monde surtout question ça les détentions préventives prolongées donc en pile monde en prison et parlementaires américains posé toutes questions tout il a cherché pour qui ça qui était capable d'améliorer conditions de la vie et moun yo dans le pays d'Haïti pas seulement résoudre problème politique là mais c'est comment yo capable et travailler avec c'est-à-dire les décideurs haïtiens des monde qui vraiment qui voulaient mener Haïti dans une direction travailler pour changer situation pour changer figure et pays d'Haïti. Et puis, question Kantea, question immigration illégale là, donc nous voyons que les parlementaires ont certaines peurs pour que les Haïtiens t'a quitté, t'a essayé de prendre la main pour aller sur côte Floride, donc dans des questions ça tout, et il y a une question qui parlait de peur que si on parle des Haïtiens, que le pays a vu un peu aller vers la Chine, et nous voyons question Chine et Taïwan, ils ont demandé est-ce que Taïwan a aidé Haïti, ils ont demandé qui est-ce que son bail qui est capable de priver si que haïtien j'en parle j'en induit question donc si est-ce que haïtien va dire mon yo dans le pays d'Haïti leader organisation yo responsabilité on peut pencher vers la Chine si yo pas une assistance des États-Unis. Ça c'est autant de questions insigneuses nèg a dit qui posaient donc parce qu'on est parlementaire yo poser toute qualité de questions pas seulement politique conditions vie moun yo etc. Donc et une résolution là que Grégory Mick parle bien pour sortir. Est-ce qu'il a sorti aujourd'hui? Est-ce qu'il a bien rédigé? Parce que faut recueillir tout, yo considérer toute suggestion, toute recommandation, yo capable à venir avec des propositions pour une sortie de crise dans le pays d'Haïti. Donc, le matin d'avant, jeudi, c'est un peu spécial puisque nous rentrer dans la live là et dans le moment côté et Odyans a commencé, Odyans vityèl a commencé, mais nous quand même rattraper nous et contrairement aux autres jours, donc nous fait ça, nous espérons que ça mieux branché. Donc sous branché, sous des commentaires nous mettre fait li n'a pas avoir jusqu'à pratiquement 2 heures pour nous récupérer un peu de temps que nous pas passer ensemble dans la live là, n'a salué plusieurs amis qui sont montés, n'a salué Florence Augustin, n'a salué Pyrrhus René Pyrrhus et autant d'amis qui montaient, je dis dans YouTube, plus d'amis sur YouTube là, donc ça fait nous plaisir. Sergio Rodriguez qui était monté et a suivi le programme là. Donc nous-mêmes nous avons fait nos idées de dialogue là, dialogue entre 3 représentants de la société civile dans le pays d'Haïti avec les parlementaires et avec les parlementaires américains et nous connaissons tout parallèlement jeudi président Jovenel Moïse et d'après ça tweet qui fait sur ce média social là il vient pour le prendre et pour l'adresser à la nation et bien et dans le moment là fait ça et il y a pile parole qui a parlé Washington journée jeudi donc en pile parole et ou même conscient que le Kongrè prend ça dossier Haïti très au sérieux et surtout un département d'État il voulait harmoniser une position harmonisée sur Haïti avec le département d'État américain. Donc, nous suivons le dossier ça. Donc, nous promettons que nous pourrons aller essayer dès que résolution est tombée pour nous gagner, pour nous capables de parler de lui, capable de parler et faire commentaire sur lui. Donc, si nous tout que nous fait que nous réalisé pendant déroulement audience virtuelle là, il y a pile d'informations mais c'est au fur et à mesure parce que c'est en anglais lié malheureusement techniquement il est impossible pour nous capables faut bien toute idée traduit mais quand même nous avons 2-3 idées sur ça que tu as discuté et jeudi dans audience virtuelle ça donc nous est que il fait connaître que c'est difficile pour l'élection de réaliser en ça donc difficile pour l'élection organisée en ça et il parlait tout de manque de représentativité de conseil électoral provisoire il fait qu'on est son conseil électoral pas légitime son conseil électoral provisoire 10 ans mis et c'est parce que c'est le président lui-même qui mettait tout le monde ça la donne et puis il fait qu'on est tout que ONI office national cap by identité cap distribuer carte dans le pays d'Haïti et ben pas capable et il paraît moyen pour le capable délibérer 4 pour moun al voter et il pense tout que annulation scène 4 son gros erreur été fait donc ça c'est pour élection ensuite décision pouvoir prend pour annuler 4 j'aime dire là c'était pas une bonne idée et puis il fait qu'on est aux américains pas doué financer élection ça aussi conditions pas réunies et puis référendum non nous le point ça référendum non li ba pile que sauter il très préoccupé pour question référendum non et puis yo considère son mal le pendier pour Haïti ce référendum ça fait donc il dit que Haïti a besoin d'un bon consensus pour organiser l'élection. Donc, grosso modo, entre autres, c'est point fort, ça, dans audition jeudi, audition virtuelle, côté des organisations et représentants d'organisations en Haïti, 3, parmi eux, Haitian Bridge Alliance, RNDDH avec NOU PAP DOMI, donc qui répondre aux questions et plusieurs parlementaires qui sont dans la Komsyon Afè Etranjè et chanm député. Donc là, son actualité, c'est l'actualité du moment, l'actualité du jour. Donc, c'est une question, donc on est vraiment content de prendre question nous. Et donc, pour nous capables d'avancer avec live là. Donc, on va suivre Global Media 28, Washington, Breaking News, ça qu'a dit, ça qu'a fait dans Washington, surtout dans Washington, et puis bien sûr avec un coup d'œil en particulier sur le pays d'Haïti.
On va suivre Breaking News, Washington politique. Ça qu'a dit, ça qu'a fait, ça qu'a cuit, dans Kongrè avec la Maison Blanche.
Voilà, donc j'aime dit là, donc on suivi Breaking News sur Global Media 28, il fait beaucoup de heures quand même, c'est sûr, mais on a avancé avec Shoah et nous espérons que les amis ont posé des questions, si vous avez des questions et étaient qu'à poser. Donc, parallèlement à ce sujet jeudi, et même capable de dire que le président Joe Biden, hier soir, eh bien, il fait un gros discours à la nation. Donc, son discours, quand le monde t'attend, et un discours côté, il promet que le 1er mai au plus tard, tout si monde qui vit aux États-Unis, eh bien, il est capable d'inscrire pour être capable prendre vaccin, inscrit pour vacciner. Il fait 1h39 minutes exactement et pas bon ici. Donc, son promesse que Joe Biden lui-même il fait, dans le moment où il a payé pour prononcer ce discours ça, on adresse à la nation, quand puis chef d'État dans le passé fait, on a de gros nouvelles, de gros accomplissements, eh bien, on adresse ça une prime time, c'est-à-dire dans le que tout et plusieurs millions d'Américains attendaient, eh bien, et Joe Biden fait discours ça pour le marquer premier anniversaire entrée coronavirus là sous territoire les États-Unis. Et donc, s'ils font bilan de situation pendant l'année qui se passe, toute tribulation, tout problème, tout chagrin, que danger que famille eh bien, subi pendant que le coronavirus a allé 527 000 Américains, il dit 527 000, mais le chiffre là continue à augmenter, près de 529 000 et plus de monde qui perdent la vie à cause du coronavirus là, eh bien, il vient avec plusieurs points, recommandations, quoi, à peu près, il y a 5 recommandations, il y a 5 points clés dans le discours. Premier point, j'aime dire là, c'est que le bail garantie, il dit, par passer de directive à tout, gouverneurs dans différents États, pour que yo prenne toutes mesures, que la PDO, pour yo prenne toutes dispositions pour que tout le monde vive sur tout territoire, dans toute tribu, et dans tout État aux États-Unis, puis yo capable déjà inscrit pour vacciner d'ici le 1er mai au plus tard, c'est-à-dire il est éligible pour vacciner, bien sûr, il y a prendre rendez-vous pour faire. Ensuite, deuxième point dans le discours de Joe Biden, non, eh bien, il fait qu'on est que par mettre à disposition du peuple américain puis plus information qui est fiable, qui va permettre que yo connaît qui ça pour faire, qui côté vaccination, c'est-à-dire vaccin disponible dans zone qui peut la caille. Et puis un nouveau site internet que monsieur dit que le président américain dit qui prend à la disposition du peuple américain, on va monter sous site là pour capable bonne idée rapide avec un peu de précision, sans avoir besoin de casser tête ou qu'on est qui côté au cas vacciner, qui ça pour faire vous vacciner, toute information ça ça nous relève l'accès à l'information. Donc accès à l'information concernant vaccination, eh bien la mettre à la portée de tout le monde. Et puis il y a une vaccination tout pour réouverture l'école là, et l'école maternelle, petit monde kindergarten, donc l'école elementary school, donc l'école eh bien ils promettent pour que tout professeur vacciné, chauffeur autobus qui va mener petit monde l'école à vacciner tout petit monde pas contaminé, et les tout demander peuple américain collaboration, participation pour toujours observer mesures barrières, toujours mettre masque, toujours laver mains, toujours prendre distance, etc. Donc, pour que le 4 juillet, c'est, il dit 4 juillet à son objectif lié, pour tout le monde capable de fêter 4 juillet. C'est pas seulement indépendance États-Unis, 4 juillet Xavier, mais plutôt indépendance États-Unis par rapport à coronavirus. Il dit, nous yoto que bagay yo poko fin trop bon, faut nous, si nous kembe, et j'en parle là, parce que faut me dire nous, taux mortalité a baissé en pile par rapport à coronavirus là, et à cause de vaccination, c'est 2 millions. Il y en a pour un taux dit que la Kembe temporal, la Kembe compare avec 2 millions de vaccinations par jour. Donc, 2 millions de vaccinations par jour. Donc, il dit la Kembe tempo ça pour que moun yo capable et vacciner. Donc, pour 4 juillet, que une grosse célébration, son 4 juillet, il dit ce qui parle indépendance des États-Unis par rapport à Covid là. Donc, il y a 3, et faut me dire, nous avons 3 vaccins qui sont disponibles. C'est Pfizer, Moderna, et puis Johnson & Johnson. Je ne sais pas qui vaccin on va le prendre. Donc, mais gagné, et voilà, caillou, et gagné 3 vaccins disponibles. Donc, ça, l'actualité, c'est sur le discours de Joe Biden, le 11 mars écoulé, c'est-à-dire vendredi soir, et côté plusieurs millions d'Américains tapent sur le discours ça, et le discours de Joe Biden, là, donc, il rassurer le peuple américain exactement pour le dire, nous pas peur, help is on the way, et surtout, il passé, capable de dire, loi COVID-19, loi de soulagement COVID-19 là, qui va permettre que moun yo d'ici week-end ça commence à joindre COP $1,400 que te promet. Et donc, si j'aime d'expliquer là, s'il y a 2 moun, faut faire $75,000 de revenus sous pour compte tout, mais si son couple loyer, faut pas dépasser $154,000 de revenus. Donc, si ou revenus ont baisse bas que ça, donc on peut recevoir chèque ça. Donc, il est capable de $2 800 par couple, $1,400 sur pour compte tout. Et donc, tout le monde a besoin comme ça, qui vit aux États-Unis, qui, bien sûr, sous son contribuable, ou étudiant, etc. Tout le monde a besoin de même valeur comme là. Donc, ma besoin de dire, et mon yo vraiment content. Donc, son bagage qui pas fait républicain en plaisir trop, parce que Joe Biden a marqué pas, Joe Biden nous capable de dire, a fait succès. Donc, avec réalisation li, en 50 jours à peu près, 50 jours sous pouvoir, et bien, nous, tout ça le fait. Donc, mon projet loi passé. Et puis, COVID-19 là, et c'est objectif là pour lui, finir avec d'ici 4 juillet pour tout le monde capable de retirer masque en figure. Donc, elle dit, monde qui voulait aller vite, tant qu'au Mississippi, tant qu'au, nous capable de dire, tant qu'au, en Texas, côté moun carrément gouverneur, et les assigné, Austin qui sont ville de l'État du Texas, il a assigné Travis, tout. Donc, de fait que, yo toujours appliqué mesures barrières, mesures mettez masque. Donc, nous, que, optimisme là, son optimisme que Joe Biden avait essayé par le peuple américain pour être capable de continuer focus pour 4 juillet, il est capable de célébrer comme ça doit. Donc, excusez-moi si je fais un petit mouvement, c'est juste pour assurer que tout est correct. Donc, nous sur une question, nous sommes trop contents pour nous capables de prendre question. Donc, on va suivre Global Media 28 Washington politique, ça qu'a fait, ça qu'a dit dans la capitale fédérale là, États-Unis.
On va suivre Breaking News, Washington politique. Ça qu'a dit, ça qu'a fait, ça qu'a cuit, en dans Kongrè avec la Maison Blanche.
Pour nous signer amis qui branchés. Donc, Voilà, donc on va excuser nous, t'es gagné Internet, tant si j'ai fait caprice là, mais toujours là avec vous. Donc, nous pas faire mes choix, donc font coup de rapide sur page Facebook là pour nous si il y a une question déjà que si vous avez envie de poser des questions, donc pour nous capable de répondre aux questions avant nous faire mes choix. Donc, on fait un coup de encore pour nous. Voilà, c'est que le moment arrivé pour nous quitter les amis. Donc, c'est un plaisir pour nous avoir aujourd'hui. Pour regarder ensemble, suivre ensemble audition ça que le député allait organiser vendredi 12 mars là pour recueillir un ensemble de recommandations que il pas fait l'administration Biden, la présidente Joe Biden sous situation dans le pays d'Haïti. Donc, j'en ai dit là, c'est sur proposition par là. Donc, c'est proposition ça qui pas fait tâche d'huile qui va provoquer un peu de réaction, qui proposait que tu as une transition qui passe par le Premier ministre Joseph Jout pour parler chita avec opposition, pour faire un dialogue avec elle, pour faire un sommet, un dialogue national avec elle, organiser ensuite élection pour sortir pays dans la crise politique là. Est-ce que vous pouvez suivre lui? Est-ce que vous pouvez est-ce que il n'y a pas que il qui consensus qui peut le dégager autour de propositions ça? C'est autant de questions à attendre et que nous peut assurément porter réponse pour vous dès que vous joignez, c'est-à-dire dialogue ça continue à faire. Donc c'est un plaisir d'avoir aujourd'hui dans live là, on espère qu'on est capable ensemble un peu plus tard et surtout dans le week-end pour un programme spécial que nous gagnons, surtout surveiller les connexions diaspora que qu'on gagne dans le week-end et vous supposé gagner la soirée correctement et c'est réaction, position République dominicaine par rapport à la situation politique là dans le pays d'Haïti.
Global Media 28 a présenté Breaking News, Washington Politique. Washington Politique, ça cap fait, ça cap cuit, ça cap dit en dans Kongrè avec la Maison Blanche, sorti lundi, arrivé vendredi, chaque après-midi 1h30, 2h, chaque soir 7h30, 9h, sur channel YouTube Global Media 28 là, avec Jean-Pierre Leroy. Global Media 28, une plateforme multimédia pour un village global.